there was a clear time when it was time to leave the corporate world right after my first son was born. And that's when I really decided, okay, I want to coach leaders and I want to bring this, people call it a magic trick. They'd be like, I don't know what you're doing, but things are changing. Like this leader is changing, just with awe. And so really, and that's what I'm so excited about in the work I'm currently doing, and we can talk about the journey to the clarity of what I really want to lean into as an entrepreneur. But that the coaching work is really about, I like to say 3 things. It's about your mind. There is the cognitive. We need to help you understand your limiting beliefs. We need to help you understand your thought patterns. And it's about the body. The nervous system holds so much wisdom and also old unhelpful patterns, and spirit.
And it just recycles over and over again if we don't learn what they are. Mm-hmm.
But who says it? It's either someone says it or it's, a common understood thing, but the body doesn't know time. And that your body can be responding to something that happened 10 years ago because it's stuck. And so in the third one, which I'm still experimenting with saying out loud, because, I work in the professional world and I connect with spirit. I am a seeker. I help people connect with that experience of themselves, but I don't use that language all the time. And I'm continuing to play with leaning into that and owning that I am a spiritual practitioner and I'm here to help you connect spiritually, whatever that means for you.
My interview is with Rachel Ryder, the founder of MetaWorks, and she is the author of Who You Are is How You Lead. Today, we dive into why Rachel believes that the first relationship any leader must work on is the one they have with themselves. You know me, I love inner work first, and you're going to love Rachel's story as an entrepreneur and her wisdom. Let's meet Rachel Ryder. Well, welcome to Extraordinary Women Radio, Rachel. It is great to have you here today.
Thank you. It is so wonderful to be here. Really excited to chat with you.
You bet. And you and I were just chatting in the pre-room here, and we were talking about how we just felt really aligned in our work. And I'm excited to dig into your work and hear more of your journey. That you had a very successful corporate career, and then now you have this very successful company. You've just launched your own book, and I'm excited to really hear more about this journey. So, how did you make this? Well, let's just even start with, you were working in the corporate world and then you found yourself working with a Zen master in a Zen monastery. How did that ever happen?
Well, it's funny. It actually predates me working in the corporate world. When I was 13 years old, I turned to my parents and said, I want to connect with a spiritual teacher.
Wow.
Yes,
13?
Yes, this is like otherworldly stuff. Like the only explanation I have is I was born with a seeking heart,
Totally.
Totally. My mother comes from a very Jewish family. We would have Shabbat dinners on Friday with her side of the family. My father was an altar boy, very Catholic, oldest of 7 kids. And so we celebrated everything. Oh, and by the way, my father was a Buddhist monk for about 7 years in California. That's where my parents met.
Wow.
So
you had all kinds of spirituality all around you.
Exactly. So it was really floating in the mix, but our family hadn't, there was no religiosity in our family. And so when I was 13, I actually wrote a poem about how I felt like I was an empty hole with wings. And it was about this seeking heart for religion. And so I said, I wanted something. And my parents were like, okay, well, you've been exposed to a lot. You've been to church, you've been to temple, you've been to the monastery. Where do you want to start? And so I actually went and shopped around to those religious communities again with loved ones and landed with Zen Buddhism and just felt a deep affinity for my teacher, who actually passed quite a long time ago. And then I started working with his, I guess the word is disciple, Shugen Roshi, who is very close to my heart. He's been, just really my true teacher, as I think we've worked together longer than John Dido Lori. But yeah, so I have been, and I was doing meditation retreats, week-long silent meditation retreats at the age of 13,
Oh my
which
gosh.
again, when
I
I
can't
say out
even
loud,
imagine. Yeah.
when I say that out loud, I'm like, yeah, that was out of the ordinary. But in the
Yeah.
time, it just was,
It was what it was there, and it was just normal for you at that
yeah.
space. And the seeker inside of you, it's like, can you describe that? I mean, can you describe
Mm,
why you think you have
mm.
that seeker gene in you?
Oh, that's such a beautiful question. It's funny. I couldn't tell you the why, but I could tell you that I think it is the premise for all of my work.
Yeah.
I
You were
think,
really called to this work that you're
yes,
doing.
yes. And I think, we'll talk about later kind of how I stepped into my own business, but I will say I run, I don't know why you run your business. I'm actually curious because I run my business so that I can pay for all of my heart seeking activity.
That's awesome. That's totally
I love
awesome.
my work with my clients,
Mhm.
obviously. And actually, I feel like I get healing from my clients as I help them heal. It
Yeah.
really feels like this infinite feedback loop. But it feels like it is foundational to my life, that
Yeah.
seeking, that who am I, that pulling back the layers of my own conditioning, my own unhelpful thought patterns, my own fight or flight neural pathways to really find out who is Rachel
Oh
at her
man.
most powerful, at her most ease.
And I'm sure that's always evolving, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
it
yeah.
is. It
That the
is.
essence of who we are to me feels like there's this seed that is planted. And this is work, and so I work with essence, work with my clients when they're building their
Mm.
brand. It's like we start with that. But what their essence was, 10 years ago to, when they were even back to when they were a child, it's like this growth, this flower blooming.
I love what you're talking about, and it makes me think of a Buddhist koan, and I'm not going to get it right, but it's something about how a log and the ash are one and the
Mm,
same. And it makes me think about what you were saying is 10 years ago, that woman's essence, it wasn't not true.
right.
It's just
Evolved.
evolved
Yeah,
and
evolved.
is
Yeah.
is it's just a different form in a deeper way, and it's still true and maybe more true, but
Yeah.
that feels so resonant to me in my work too. I mean, like I said, I think about that 13-year-old meditating. I'm like, damn girl, and
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
how far I've come, and
Yeah.
still how vital that was to
That's
that
so cool.
adolescent.
So you do that as a teenager and you land in the corporate world. You build a really successful career in the world of
Yeah.
HR. Was that kind of like a weird dichotomy?
Well, it's funny. It was, yes, and even a weird dichotomy for my family. I am the product of two ex-hippies who became yuppies. They realized they needed to make money to provide for their children. But we had mismatching furniture growing up. I mean, I remember not inviting people over. We didn't have a TV, and we are in like the suburbs we're on Long Island,
Hmm.
where that just alternative living was not thought well upon. So the fact that I went into the corporate world from these two hippies was very disorienting.
Right, right.
My parents were very supportive and also, I think, confused.
You're like, what is she doing?
Yes, and I like went to Brooks Brothers and bought these suits and button-down
Oh
shirts,
my
which was
God,
very,
yes, yes. So I can
so
relate to that.
antithesis
Yeah,
of my upbringing, and I think probably the antithesis of me at the heart of it.
yeah, yeah,
But I needed to, I think, just find myself
yeah,
against that. And so, what was so to your question about that juxtaposition, as I leaned into the corporate world and became successful, the things that were so vital to me started becoming really glaring. The things that appealed to me about the corporate world were rules, infrastructure, systems, like accountability, the consequences. That wasn't totally a reality in my home growing up. There were so many beautiful things, but those were not them. And so it was very nice and comforting for me. However, the more I leaned into it and became more successful, like I said, the more glaring my own values became
Yeah.
clearly in conflict.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's where it was like, it's funny, this happened a couple of years before I left, but I started when I was an HR professional, I helped people exit out of the company voluntarily or involuntarily. Involuntarily was never fun,
No.
but voluntarily, I would notice I start being jealous of the people quitting.
Oh, you were like, oh God, I wish that could be me.
Yes. And like, it took me a very long time to notice the yearning. I'd be like, oh my gosh, it sounds, whatever you're doing sounds so exciting. And then like, I just pay attention to that thought and that emotion connection. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah. So
I
how did you
might.
make the leap?
So it took me a couple of years
Yeah.
because, it
The
felt
seeds get
good.
planted and you're
Yes,
like,
exactly. Yeah, no, it felt good to know how to play the game and be
yeah.
rewarded. And people really thought highly of me and they really wanted to see me be successful. Um, what really happened is I started to pivot when I was responsible for a major layoff, which is funny. You read the news these days and people are getting laid off in the tens
Yeah.
of thousands. I mean,
Right.
that was not me 15 years ago.
Right.
A major layoff was 60 people and you sat in the room with each of them, which
Right.
again is not
Yeah. And what's
currently.
happening today is just crazy.
It's
It's really
shocking.
sad. It's really
Yes.
sad.
Yes. And it was sad 15 years ago when I
It
had to sit
was.
in the room with
And
these
that's
folks.
and that's where I was 15 years ago when I left, was I was in that room, getting that
Yes.
layoff. And I always say now that that was the best gift that ever happened to me. But so this it's gotten even less human focused,
It's
with these mass layoffs.
shocking.
And when you think about this, this essence of who you are, and all this beautiful work and this journey that you're on, having gone through a spiritual journey, and then and bringing in the corporate world, where did you start to see this
Mm.
opportunity to do things differently?
Mm. Well, it's funny. So, something I didn't mention is my mother's a psychoanalyst, and so I've
Mhm.
been in therapy for all my life. I mean, I think one of the reasons I've been a seeker is I've struggled with anxiety and psychosomatic issues like TMJ and ulcers. And so while I'm working in the corporate world, the pressure's getting higher. My somatic body is
Yeah.
responding.
Mhm.
I'm having really major ulcers, really bad headaches for TMJ. Sometimes I'm on a liquid diet. So I've been in psychoanalysis for like 17 years. And my mother she's interesting. She's the byproduct of most of my access to wonderful professionals. And she, as a psychoanalyst, was in a place in her career, she was feeling burnt out and she discovered somatic experiencing.
Yeah.
And she was like, Rachel, you need to see a somatic experiencing practitioner. And she was like, because talking was profoundly helpful for me for the first 5 to 10 years.
Right.
But there's something that your brain can't fix if it's sitting in your nervous system.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so interesting. You know how I found somatic experiencing was through equine assisted work that I do.
I've heard how powerful
And
that
that's, it drops you into your body and you
is.
start to discover all this wisdom that's inside our bodies, and that shifts
Yes.
everything. So I totally get how important that is.
It's stunning, the
Mhm.
changes.
Mhm.
And so I started experiencing symptoms that I had chronically for 10 to 15 years start to unravel a little through the work with the somatic experiencing practitioner. I was like, I need more of this. And I actually went and got trained as I was working in the corporate
Okay.
world as an
So
HR
so the seeds
professional.
started getting
So
planted, but there was a
exactly. So
different way.
now,
Yeah.
exactly. So now the deep value system and the environment I'm working in is becoming really separate.
Yeah. And you're sitting in rooms having conversations with people, having to let them go and
Exactly.
seeing everything that's happening in their bodies
I'm feeling it in
and
mine.
feeling it, right?
And I'm a deep empath. And one of the things I've understood through somatic experiencing is because one of my pieces of work is boundaries, because I have such a lack of boundaries, I pick up on someone else's somatic experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that room, I was just absorbing people's
Yeah. Which
bodies.
probably was just tearing you apart inside. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, it was awful. And that's where I leaned. I mentioned this in the book that I really leaned on my own spiritual experience because I felt so out of control of the situation and so in such deep conflict with what I was complicit in
Hmm.
that the best I could do in the moment was to bow 3 times for each individual that I was meeting with the next day,
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
sending and lighting incense for them and saying, may their life go well.
Oh,
I
what a
mean,
blessing you were to them,
I still
and
would
in
have.
times of difficulty. So you see this not really in alignment anymore. You make this decision to make this leap into starting your own company. And what's the vision of it? Tell us the vision of
Mm,
what you wanted to do and what you do. I mean, it's not even what you want to do, what you do with your company that is different, that helps people who are in leadership in a way that is that inside out work.
absolutely. So from that moment, it was a couple of years I stepped into coaching internally and I built internal coaching programs for
Oh,
companies. So
cool.
I started to
And
see,
they were big companies. They
yes,
were.
large tech companies.
Hmm.
And I started to see the impact that coaching could have. And it was this real gift where it was like low stakes, and I got to play with my somatic experiencing
Hmm.
in the workplace
Hmm.
and just, test it
Which is
out.
a
And
great way to build your business, right? Because
yeah,
you're having the opportunity to coach, you're experimenting with it, and you're seeing the results.
exactly. And really gaining confidence in myself and the tools.
Hmm.
And that's what's so remarkable about somatic experiencing for me as a coach is I don't have to talk about your trauma with you. It's not appropriate. I'm not a trained professional in trauma.
Yeah.
And we're talking about your workplace power and experience.
Yeah.
And your body is holding things and reacting to things as though they're trauma and they're not. And that's where we
Mm.
can work. And it's safe. We don't have to talk about your alcoholic father or your abusive mother. We can say, oh, that feels like that. That may show up. And then, we help you talk to your therapist about it, but then we get to help you in your nervous system know that your colleague is not your mother.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I got to start to play with that in the workplace. And so there was a clear time when it was time to leave the corporate world right after my first son was born. And that's when I really decided, okay, I want to coach leaders and I want to bring this, people call it a magic trick. They'd be like, I don't know what you're doing, but things are changing. Like this leader is changing,
Yeah.
just with awe. And so, really, and that's what I'm so excited about in the work I'm currently doing, and we can talk about the journey to the clarity of what I really want to lean into as an entrepreneur. But that the coaching work is really about, I like to say 3 things. It's about your mind.
Hmm.
There is the cognitive. We need to help you understand your limiting beliefs. We need to help you understand your thought patterns. And it's about the body. The nervous system holds so much wisdom and
Yes.
also old unhelpful patterns
Hmm.
and
And
spirit.
it
And
just
I,
recycles over and over
yes,
again if we
and
don't
it just,
learn what they are.
exactly.
Hmm.
But who says it? It's either someone says it or it's, a common understood thing, but the body doesn't know time.
Mm. Hmm.
And that your body can be responding to something that happened 10 years ago because it's stuck.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so in the third one, which I'm still experimenting with saying out loud because, I work in the professional world and I connect with spirit. I am a seeker. I help people connect with that experience of themselves, but I don't use that language all the time. And I'm continuing to play with leaning into that and owning that I am a spiritual practitioner.
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
here to help you connect spiritually, whatever that means for you.
It's so funny, there was years ago when I was really doing some transformation in my business, and I was journaling as like, what did my business want to be? And
Mm.
I was doing business coaching, and it's like, what does it want to be? And I got this message very clear that it wanted to be a spirit business. And I was like, what?
Mm.
And I could feel that resistance of like, oh my gosh, do I want to go there? I clearly had come through a very spiritual journey myself to come into to being an entrepreneur. But there was this this wall that came up immediately that was like, oh, do I really want to go there? So I get that. And
Mm.
but once I started to own it and say, you know what, what I do, there's a lot of magic in owning the spirit side of things.
Yes,
And that once we start to step into that, and I would say spirit, however you spirit,
exactly.
we don't have to be, and you clearly have led that kind, you've led that life from that viewpoint. And so I really honor that. And I see when you look at the corporate world today and leaders in the corporate space, what do you think happens if we can bring more spirit into more spirit, more somatic experiencing? And what was the first one you said? There was
Mind.
mind. Okay, so what
Yes,
happens
mind,
when we
body.
bring those three components together into the corporate world? What shifts?
So this is where we come to my other journey, which is my anti-racism journey,
Uh-huh. Hmm.
and really looking at how white culture and white cultural norms have not just been of disservice to the people of color around me and how I support them, but to myself.
Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
really believe that in the corporate world, there are cultural norms that are unhelpful, and we are in a breaking point where they also will make it unsuccessful. So they're unhelpful to individuals, but I think they will also start making companies unsuccessful.
Yeah.
That push, that there is a right way to do things, that um, idea of perfectionism, that idea of constant urgency. I think all of these pieces, when I work with leaders, and I work with the top leaders, that's the other thing I want to say, that this work is vital. They
Right.
have an impact on the entire organization. And
But
the
it has
more,
to start with the top.
exactly,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. And the more they examine the way they show up, the more they examine what they're perpetuating because of what they've learned,
Hmm.
what they are fueling, and the culture they're creating as a result, the more they look at it, the more they understand the impact, the more things unravel that are unhelpful,
Right.
the more the happier they are, the better lead by example they do. So let's get
Yeah.
specific. I I work with a leader who everything is urgent. This
Hmm.
is something we've been examining. And it's really helpful to see it as a cultural norm that you've learned, as a body experience, that if nothing's ever okay, everything's always urgent. And then it's like, how does your body function if everything's always urgent? You're not sleeping through the night. And then, of course, he sets that tone for the whole organization. He's slacking someone at 2 a.m. and someone's like, oh my God. And so there's this, and the more we've worked on that examination of the urgency, first of all, the more strategic people are in responding to his urgency because it is more strategically placed instead of everything's urgent.
Right.
The better he's sleeping and therefore making better decisions. The ripple effect is profound.
Right.
And the
Right.
company is more settled and more successful, that he's seen less turnover in his team than he has in a very long time.
Right.
And,
Because he's really come home into himself.
yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. And
And
I
the
really do
shift.
think that's the power of this work.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think this is, you talk about the tension that has been in the corporate world, the very driven linear approaches. And, granted, you need linear approaches in business, but I think what's got left behind is this softer, more humanistic approach to who we are as leaders and
Yeah.
showing up in that space first, and then the linear piece can come in behind. And I can see that
Yes.
happening in my business. I can see it happening in my clients' businesses. When we start with that inner work first, the linear processes aren't so sharp. They're actually supportive versus
That's the
disruptive.
word. They support it.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
They support your ability to communicate. They support your ability to turn off when you want. Like the whole point of process and systems and communication tools is so business can flow more smoothly and everybody gets a little breathing room.
yeah,
So I
yeah.
completely agree.
And I think the other side of that is what's happened in the past. And I mean, I can just go back to my old corporate days. I got lost of who, who am I? Got lost in the midst of all of the linear
Mm,
hard edges. And when I had to really go through a big, deep journey to come back home to me.
mm,
And in doing that, there was this whole expansion of who I was and it was kind of even going back to our very initial conversation around the essence of who we are, how it continues to evolve and grow. There was so much inside of me that I didn't even know who I was. And the more I kept pulling back the layers, the more it was like, oh, the lightness of it
yeah.
really came about. And I think that really happens. It happened for me in my business. Did that happen for you in your business?
That's such a beautiful description of I'm going to answer your question, but I first like the title of my book is Who You Are is How You Lead. And you just described so beautifully what I'm trying to say, which is I'm not saying that the essence of what you were born with is how you're a leader forever. I'm saying
Okay.
that in the moment, how you show up is how you're leading. And
Mm,
the kind of layers of the onion you were talking about, pulling back and pulling back, that there just became lighter.
hmm.
And it became this lightness that then you lead that way. You
Yeah.
lead from that place after you do the inner work and understanding who you are and what's getting in the way for you and how to engage with others. And you just so beautifully described, I
Mm,
think, what I'm trying to
thank you.
capture in the book. And so to answer your question about what I've seen in my own business, I mean, it's unequivocally yes. I have to say, I think just just stepping into the role as entrepreneur, it's like a seeker's either nightmare or fantasy because you got to look at your stuff, right?
You totally do. You can't be in the world of an entrepreneur without looking at our inner stuff.
Exactly. And that's been my road for years and it is constantly humbling,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
and it's been so interesting to see. I have a team of folks who works in-house with me and a coach who works for me as well, and to watch my own leadership style evolve as I wrote the book, as I work with my clients, to watch my own levels of urgency. Oh, why didn't we get back to that client? Or, oh, we sent the wrong email. And for me to have to work with my own inner stuff of, well, what is perfectionism here? What
Yeah.
is this? Is this an appropriate level of urgency? Like, how are you coming across? And really peeling back that layer and being able to examine, Rachel, where is this urgency coming from within you?
Yeah.
Okay, this is not about the team member who made a mistake because the process was an issue and the client isn't leaving. And so, yes, it's absolutely had an impact on how I show up in my business.
That's excellent. What would you attribute to some of your best success steps that you've taken as an entrepreneur?
I mean, I feel, now I might just be a broken record, but inner work for me. I
Yeah.
mean, that's literally my overhead is my inner work.
Yeah.
I think I recently wrote a LinkedIn post that I have 6 people I work with on a pretty consistent basis just for me.
That's excellent.
I
That's
have,
excellent.
I won't go through the list, but
Oh no, I do because I'd love to hear.
okay, great. So obviously I have a business coach.
Uh-huh.
I have an energy healer.
Uh-huh.
I have a body code practitioner, which is connected to energy healing,
Mm-hmm.
but in a deeper way. I have, I don't know how she would call herself, but she's a woman who works with crystals, who
Uh-huh.
helps connect with crystals and
Uh-huh.
connect with spirit in that way.
Yeah.
I have a physical trainer because the more I get in my body, the clearer I am.
Yeah.
And who's my sixth? Oh, my SE therapist.
Oh, there you go. Somatic person.
Yes, my somatic person.
That's
So, and
excellent.
it's just, and because I see myself as a template for my business, I am the product.
Yeah.
I'm
Because this
not
is the same work that you're doing with your clients to help them grow and evolve, and you've seen that evolution.
exactly. And I will tell you the most powerful work is to sit in the room with a client and not believe the story. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't mean that in a dismissive way. I mean
Yeah.
that in a very powerful way, that I see them for their wholeness.
Yeah.
And I can only do that if I believe that within myself.
That's nice. That's beautiful. That's really, really beautiful. So tell us about your book, Who You Are is How You Lead.
Yeah. So this, speaking of inner work, it took a lot to
Yeah.
write.
That's all. Is this your first book?
It's my first book.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
have one book, and it took everything I had to write that book too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's, one of the pieces, my inner work as a entrepreneur is working on my comfort with visibility,
Mm-hmm.
which is hilarious because as an entrepreneur, you need to increase your visibility.
Yes.
And it's been like I really do feel like I'm healing generational trauma
Mm-hmm.
in being visible.
Yeah.
And so writing this book was just a lot of looking at that.
Yeah.
But that's not the crux of the book. But in and of itself, it's been a beautiful journey. And the book itself, it felt really important for me to do a couple of things. One
Mm-hmm.
is to pull the curtain open around senior, like upper echelon executive coaching. It's very elite. We are a low volume, high impact shop. So we
Mm-hmm.
work with very powerful leaders.
Yep.
And so no one's really talking about what they're talking about. CEOs aren't usually talking to the people who work for them about their concerns or what keeps them up at night.
Yeah.
And the people who work for CEOs are also not doing that. That's why they have a coach. And
Yeah.
so a part of this book is really talking about these stories to normalize these struggles that leaders are having at the highest levels. And then to say, and hey, it's all about the inner work. And what that means is you have it.
Right.
Like you don't need, yes, you can get a leadership training. Yes, but it's really already within you. I actually was recently writing an article. There's this Buddhist story about this impoverished individual who finds diamonds sewn into the hem of their rags. And the point in the Buddhist story is we all have the gems within us.
Diamonds there to uncover. That's beautiful.
Exactly. And so that's really what the Who You Are is How You Lead is really about, is, being the most senior leader of an organization. It's not like the leadership fundamentals change. They all stay the same. It's the sophistication, the complexity of the problem.
Right.
And so the reason why the leadership fundamentals are hard to apply is because of our inner demons. I like to say work is where your demons go to hide. Because no one's looking for them there.
Right. But you're feeling them and experiencing them.
Exactly. But your mother's still showing up as your colleague. Your belief systems about if you're good enough are still leaking everywhere. And so Who You Are is How You Lead is a confluence of these stories of the most senior professionals that I worked with, and how to weave in the inner work to apply it to your professional life. And so there's stories and a how-to. So how do you apply those tools yourself? And of course, I add my story as well to support, to give additional context and also help the reader understand the work I've done over the years.
Yeah. Yeah. So good. So good. I love it. And as you look to your future, what do you see in front of you?
It's funny you should ask that, because I am working internally on that. Actually, we're rebranding. We're in the midst of a rebrand. On my website currently, it's about how to communicate effectively. And through this book, I've really been able to own, kind of like you were saying, I want a spirit business. I've been able to own, you know what? this is about the inner work.
Yeah.
That's what we're here to do. We want folks who want to do that.
Yeah.
We want folks who have been on that journey and don't know how to apply it to the professional world. So
Yeah.
I'm really leaning into getting clear on my calling card, so to speak,
Yeah.
getting clear on what the lighthouse, whose storm I am a lighthouse in the
Yeah.
midst of. And I feel like
Yeah.
that's been a real journey.
Yeah.
And so my hope for the next few years is to really help folks know who it is we can work with and who we can help, and really call to the hearts of those folks, and continue to work on my own visibility, to lean
Yeah.
into talking about this. And
Yeah.
this work, it is magical to
Yeah.
see how it transforms in professional lives. And I would love to bring that more to kind of a conversation
Yeah.
in the corporate tech.
And I think that your choice on the language around inner work, I think that's really good. Just as I mean, I think that it's going to land for people. It's going to land for your right clients.
I appreciate
Yeah, I think it's the right level of the chasm they have to cross to say, oh gosh, I have to start someplace in it, because you were even talking about, I saw something about you use, like an executive coach might come in with very tactical, goal oriented questions to start with, but that's not where you start. Where do you start? What are those
that.
questions that you like to start with?
Yeah. Yeah. We may start with, okay, what do you want to get from this work? But then we're going to talk about, and what do you notice in your body when you start to talk about
Yeah.
this?
Yeah.
What are the inner roadblocks as we think about approaching this conversation?
Yeah.
And really, that's exactly the power of this work. Again, you don't have to talk about the storyline of your childhood in order for us to access deep shifts in your neural pathways and how you
Yeah.
respond and show up differently.
So good. So good. So where can people learn more about you, your book, and all of your work?
They can find me on www.metaworks, METTAWORKS.io, or find me on LinkedIn.
Hmm.
That's mostly where I'm present. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook too, but let's start with the website and LinkedIn.
Excellent. Excellent. And then the final question I always close with are, what are three pearls of wisdom you'd like to leave us with today?
Mm. Mm. You always have access to your inner world. And you can start by just paying attention and collecting data of what your visceral response is to something, how you feel about something.
That's brilliant. That's really good.
Yeah. And so I would say you have access to your inner world, collect data. And I would say the third one is, have compassion and accountability.
Mm.
When you collect that data, be curious and don't let yourself slide.
So good. So good. Well, Rachel, this has been just a pleasure getting to know you, to hear your story, and I'm excited about your work. I think this is the kind of work that's really needed in our world right now, and I think that so many of us are called to be. We've been on this journey. We've been called to do the work in the spaces that we do it, and I see the corporate world as one of those spaces that really needs the transformation, the change, and it's lights like yours that are really going to help change that for the future.
Thank you so much. It was so lovely to chat with you today. It's so nice to be with a kindred spirit.
Yeah, totally. We knew from the very get-go that there was a kindred spirit here. So excellent. So good to meet you, and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.